Well, hello and welcome to today's webcast, the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A session. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. Pleased to present Deanne McCormick, no relation, who's our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha Software. And today, Deanne will be going over some cool Alpha stuff. I believe today's session will be on scalable vector graphics, which is a brand new feature in version 4.1 of Alpha Anywhere. He'll also be taking your questions, and I'd like to remind you that this is a questions and answers session. So please, in fact, right now, go ahead and type some questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. The other thing I'd like to let you know before we get started is that these sessions are being recorded, and you can find a copy of the recording at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let us begin. Hello, Deanne, are you there? Oh, looks like you're on mute.
I'm just courteous.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. There you are. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
Do I need to hit the record button, or you got the recording?
I've got the recording. Yep.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Well, welcome everybody. Deanne McCormick here, Lead Solutions Engineer for Alpha, and I wanted to say thank you so much for taking your time to visit with us. We got some really good questions that came in. We're going to talk through the week, so we appreciate that. And I've got some more information on the new 4.1 release. As Dave said, what's super critical to us is what you need to learn, so feel free to take the time to go into the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel and enter in there your questions. He'll be monitoring them. We'll get through as many as we can in our session today. Want to do a couple quick things here. First is just as we've talked about before, we have Alpha DevCon 2006. It's filling up very, very quickly. Just a phenomenal event. In fact, we had another planning meeting today on it, and beyond the training that we've already announced in terms of mobile optimized forms, which everybody should attend because it's going to be absolutely fabulous. You're going to walk away with actionable skills that you can go back and immediately address. We also are lining up some really cool sort of other seminar presentations on using Bootstrap to make your apps look nicer, and other techniques to really create powerful web applications and dashboards and other pieces. So a very wide range of knowledge and capabilities are going to be demonstrated here. So you can just go to alphasoftware.com/devcon2016 and register there. Just again, remember we have the speakers. We have our keynote speakers, which is Paul Gillen. And also, I wonder where's the train? Oh, here it is. Right up top. So you can go to the training section. That will give you a little bit more of an outline of what's going on in the training, and you can register for the training, which is the day before the actual convention. And I've been noticing I booked my flights actually this morning, and the rates have come down a little bit. So whatever we're at, I was able to pick up some pretty good deals. So this is the time to do that. Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to that, and also. So with that, the major thing that happened this last week, or within the last week or so, was, let me go back up here, the 4.1 release. This is Alpha Anywhere version 4.1. These new capabilities are very powerful. We've already talked about them, excuse me, but today I'm going to dive into one in particular, which is SVG. Actually, that should be Deanne, icons, not fonts. I'm so used to font awesome icons and stuff like that. I just programmed in my mind. We'll also be going over the push notification capabilities and our new integration with SparkPost, which is an outstanding vendor who's going to be kind of replacing Mandrill out in the marketplace, since Mandrill's kind of had a business change of how they're operating and what they're going to go. But today what we'd like to do, and I need to change it here as I real time, is SVG icons. They have been added to the 4.1 release. Now, I'm going to, if you don't want to listen to me for a while, I'm going to show you real simple. Basically, it's a new set of icons that are available in the application. Before you would go into the environment, and let me just go ahead and create a new UX here to show you here. And if I go in and create this UX, and for people who are new, I'm in the development environment. The UX is our form component. If we go to controls, and let's say I add a button control, Alpha has a lot of really neat things. For instance, I can say, oh, you know what, I want to show an image. And then we can click image name in here, and we have different sources for these images. A URL for an external image, a built-in image, that CSS icon, and now you'll see SVG icon. So it's a new set, and just to kind of show you how you're probably familiar with this, is we actually have 3 of them now: Font Awesome, Material Icons, and SVG icons. And you can just pick one of those 3. It's got a bunch of pre-made icons. You can see some examples here, a lot more colorful, more robust, and it's been incorporated. But I want to take a little more time to talk about it. So that was kind of like that's the Cliff Notes, is that basically there's a new set of icons that are available. You just select them the same way you do Font Awesome and Material Icons right now. But I want to kind of go into the background of why this actually is pretty important stuff. So bear with me as I talk a little bit more about SVG icons, and more importantly, SVG, because it's really a critical part of Alpha's roadmap moving forward. So first, what does SVG mean? Well, that means Scalable Vector Graphics, and this is really critical because a lot, basically, you know, if you import images and stuff, you can blow the images up, but they may not scale properly. And if you want to have multiple resolutions, you kind of have to prepare all that stuff. The cool thing about vector graphics is that they're sort of drawn, and they can scale infinitely large as much as you need them. So they're very, very powerful. The other thing about scalable vector graphics is that they are, let me jump here, they're an open standard, meaning that they're standardized across all web browsers, mobile devices, etc. So it has incredible support out in the ecosystem. So if you use SVG technology, you're going to be comfortable knowing that it's going to work on all platforms, on all mobile, and it's really, and I'll tell a little bit more about what are the kind of the cool things that you have here. But what is SVG? Well, here's a long-winded word. Basically, it's a XML-based vector image format for two-dimensional, not three-dimensional, but two-dimensional graphics. But really cool is it has support for interactivity and animation. So vector is really powerful. I mean, you think of tools like Adobe Illustrator, etc. Instead of painting with bits, you're painting basically with what are called vectors. And the neat thing about vectors is that you can apply and make them grow, make them small, and very important is add interactivity so they respond to input. And very critical, which we'll see a lot more in the future, is animation. You can create very high quality, small footprint animations using SVG. And very important, as I mentioned, it's the industry standard so that people can support to it. It's well published out there. There's a lot of training on it and other pieces there, so it's really exciting. So you're like, well, that's exciting, but what's the deal? Well, here's some of the bullet points that are very important about it. First is that SVG, when you look at it on paper or in a database or whatever, it's just text. It's done using XML text. So therefore, it opens up these really key capabilities to do things like searching, index, scripting. You could create scripts to create a icon instead of having it fixed. So you could do some really cool things there. They can be highly compressed, therefore they have a very small footprint. As we mentioned before, they're scalable. That means you can make them small, large, big, large. Like, I don't know if anybody went out, oh, I should probably, would it be a spoiler if I said something about Captain America movie this weekend? Is it too soon?
It might be.
Yeah, okay, I'll hold. I'm going to tell it next week, but there's a great example. For people who have seen the movie, at the airport, that's an example of SVG in action. Is what you saw there in terms of small and large. Pretty good analogy, huh? There we go. The other is that SVG images can be printed at whatever level. So if you put SVG things on it and then you print it, it actually renders very nicely and comes across looking very sharp, and you don't get the pixelation and other things you get with other technologies. And since they're handled by the local web browser, they can be zoomable, so you can actually have animation zooming in and out and other people. It is an open standard. That means that it's highly supported, but more importantly, it's growing with a very large ecosystem, and they're XML, and XML is very well known and very easy to put. In fact, there's a lot of built-in XML tools in Alpha to be able to support XML manipulation. So not only is it a set of icons, but underlying it is a whole set of technology that allows you to dynamically create them, dynamically change them, modify them, build your own libraries, and it's very, very well supported. Actually, if you go into your web browser and you just go SVG icons, you're going to see out there that there's like, for instance, you can actually generate your own icons using online tools. This is called ICOmoon.io. And so, you know, they have free icons here, but they also have Generate SVG, where what you can do, and I won't go through it right now, but it allows you to build your own icons, generate that SVG, copy that, put that into your app, and you're good to go. And so there's an enormous amount of support for it, and so therefore you're not going to be limited by that, you know. So really cool stuff, and you can go out on the web and check it out, etc., and look for that. So SVG is very, very powerful and very handy. So let me do a quick demonstration just to show you how cool this is. And I want to give credit, the real person that's been driving behind this is Dan Bricklin in terms of mobile optimized forms. You're starting to hear kind of how it all ties together, is that he has been delving into SVG, focusing on it, understanding it, and incorporating that technology cleanly into Alpha's environment, because he sees the enormous amount of power that it's going to provide, and I'll give you a little bit there. So there's a great website, W3 Schools, I've used it before. They actually have a nice little SVG demonstration, but I'm going to go ahead and show you that working in Alpha right now. So let me go ahead and go here. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. I should have gone there. Let me go to my demonstration. Where's demonstration? Where's demonstration? Huh. I must have been opening and working a lot of stuff this morning. There we go. Okay. And let me go into my A5W page, and I have my SVG one. Where is that? You can't. Let's see. I didn't do it. Well, let me go ahead and do it right now. Okay. So for people who are new, I'm in the Alpha web control panel. That's your central location. As you can see on the left, you have a whole bunch of different items here. You have web components, which we focus a lot on, but you also have your A5W pages, which is Alpha's variant of HTML. It supports all HTML capabilities, plus also allows you to do scripting and other pieces there. And then as you can see, there's other things such as CSLs, JavaScript, etc. So I'm going to create a new A5W page, and I'm going to just use a blank page and nothing very exceptional. I'm going to save this as SVG demo underscore. There's no UX to it, so I'm just going to do that. And so this just looks like plain vanilla HTML. I can go ahead and say, you know, hello group. Save it, do a live preview by clicking down here, and it'll render that. Nothing super exciting, but you know, we have an HTML page that's been rendered and taken care of. Now, what I'm going to do is, here's a great site, and I borrowed this demonstration, so I'm going to go to that site. And again, there's other ones that handle it from there. Oops, let me go here. Go over to here. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this information out right here, and I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to put that right there. So you'll notice that it's basically looks like HTML, but it has a new tag called SVG for Scalable Vector Graphics. So now I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go ahead and do a live preview. And you're going to notice what shows up on the screen is it dynamically renders a graphic for me. In this case, a circle with a body. Now, this is a very simplistic graphic, but you can get insanely complex with this, and it handles insanely complex capabilities. Now, check this out. So I've got this circle here. So let's make a few quick changes. First, you know what? I want it to be blue. And so for the stroke, I want it to be blue, and the fill, I want it to be red. Okay, so notice I'm manipulating this text. Now watch what happens when I do the live preview. You're going to see that now we have a blue circle with a red item there. Now let's get a little more interesting here. Let's go ahead and change the CX to be like 100, the CY to be 100. Okay, so that's the bounding box. So we're going to go ahead and give a live preview of that, and you'll notice that. Oh, and I'm sorry, that put kind of its offset on the page, and then the radius here, I'm going to make that 100 to make it larger, and I'm going to do my little preview here, and you'll notice now I have a different location and a much larger circle here. So I didn't actually have to go into Adobe Illustrator and create a circle and change it, and if I wanted to, there's no reason why this little code right here couldn't be auto-generated by Alpha through a script. So you could say, you know, scale it. And so it's very powerful, and this is a very simplistic example of it, but if you get out on the net, you're going to see that there's very, very complex capabilities. As you can see, it looks like XML. You have, you know, the ending and beginning tags. And so what's nice is Alpha already has a set of icons built in, so you don't have to actually learn the standard. You can put those in there. But what's really cool about it is as you get creative, you can create boxes. So let's just, you could create boxes, you could create things. So it gives you a lot of creative freedom, and we'll talk more about that as we get into mobile optimized forms. More and more you're going to start creating your own controls. And the way you can create your own controls is by using SVG. So if in fact I wanted this to be a cool looking button right here, I could create my own buttons out of SVG and then make this clickable within Alpha, and it can handle it. So for instance, we've seen some cool stuff where you take SVG and you create what looks like a fuel gauge, and that's all SVG. It can be scaled up and down. It shows what level of fuel it is, and what you can do is show not only what level it is, but then click on it and interact with it with mobile optimized forms. So as we get into mobile optimized forms, we're going to show you how this SVG plays in. But I want to kind of expose it today and talk a little bit of background so you can start learning about it, because it's a very powerful enabling technology, both near term to kind of make your interfaces look a little fancier. There's a lot of examples in terms of icons and other deals. As we go in the future, it's going to be more of an interactive tool for you to create interfaces that are very, very powerful, and there's some actual great videos of that online in terms of how to put together that. So that is a quick example of it, and you can, again, the place I got that was off of W3 Schools, but just type for SVG tutorials and you'll see a whole bunch of different things that are associated with it that you can play with it. So you can see over here, like if I want to do a rectangle, I can go in here, and it'll take a second here. So here's an example of that. So let's go ahead and just copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in here. And now when I do my live preview, now I have a circle and a rectangle that are showing on there. And you notice that it does the clipping and everything, and you can handle opacity, a whole bunch of other things, so you can get really fancy in terms of creating very cool combination things out of SVG. And again, it's all just a set of text commands. So think of having to store this in your database as an image, and now think of it as just storing maybe, you know, a very small amount of items in a database. You're going to see some of that power and availability. The other thing I like to mention on this, and this is very critical, is performance. Is that when you're doing this, the rendering of this is being done by the web browser or the device. So therefore it's using the local hardware. So when I'm actually sending this from the Alpha server down to my browser, what's coming down from Alpha is a small set of basically text. So it comes down very, very, very quickly. And then the browser takes over and is responsible for any actual rendering of the SVG. So it provides very small footprint with incredible speed, because all of these browsers are increasing their rendering speed of these things faster and faster and faster. Contrast that with having a bitmap image that's up on the server that you have to serve up and send down. So you don't just send down maybe, you know, a couple hundred bytes of text, you actually send down a half a meg of you know, data. And the other is that since it's now down on the mobile browser, there's no reason why you can't use JavaScript and client-side activity to actually interact and modify these items when you're there. So it's really powerful, and I think that's where Dan comes from, is that there's just this, it's a fairly simple concept, meaning that let the browser do the rendering and we have a basically there, but more importantly is that it unlocks an enormous amount of speed improvements and flexibility in terms of what you do. And really important is client-side manipulation. Thus, if you're doing PhoneGap apps or anything that's going to be disconnected, you don't have to worry about going to the server to get maybe a different size image. You can do a lot of those rendering locally and handle it on the local basis, and that will become very important for there. Now, a couple other things I want to touch on this, which is powerful, is again, why is it important? So again, it's small, has a very small footprint. It's fast, meaning that all the rendering is done on the client side. So instead of burdening your server, you now have the client side doing it. It's extremely flexible. It's an open standard. You can do the animations, you can do the dynamic stuff. So whatever you want to do with it, you're going to have a lot of opportunities and sample code to do that. And last but not least is Alpha is embracing it significantly. It's a core part of our technology because it unlocks so many great capabilities that are ideal for disconnected mobile apps, for high-speed, very interactive desktop web apps. So it's really, really exciting there. Now, here's a great example. You've probably already heard about this, and we're going to spend some time on this both at the training at the DevCon, but the Alpha Ink Control, which is, I think, one of the most exciting parts of Alpha's Mobile Optimize. It really hasn't, the capability is there and it's actually available for you to play with. But I want to spend a few moments because underlying the Alpha Ink Control is SVG. So if you haven't seen it, here's a screenshot, and I apologize, I'm going to zoom this up. It's a little hard to see. But here is an example app that was built, an automobile condition report. And so you're going to notice that in this app you have a picture, but also notice on the right you have like what looks like a page from a notebook. And you'll notice in there that up top in the right is your full page. Down below you'll see, and you'll notice there's kind of a red dotted line showing you the details of that page. The idea behind this is that when you're working on a tablet, you may not have a full 8.5 by 11 page that you normally have. And notice what's on the page. You actually have handwriting that's either done with the finger or now with one of these pens or like an Apple Pen or something along those lines. And what you're able to do is that you're basically able to annotate in this environment, and what it's doing behind the scenes is it's converting all of this into SVG for you. And therefore, when it stores this set of text, so you have a background, in this case it's a notebook style background, all the stuff on the front, access to hydrant, block, John Smith, the signature, move with the arrow, etc. And this is a great example for like a fire emergency kind of thing. It's basically rendering all that into SVG and then storing it in the data as SVG. So therefore, it's small. Whenever you need it, it re-renders. You can scale this up and make, if you're on a desktop, you can then make this the size of the whole browser window and it will scale accordingly. Since this doesn't show it here, but there's no reason why you couldn't actually have the ink control have that image underneath it, and I didn't find one for this, but the idea is you would have an image and on top of it you have the ink control and you're drawing on top of that image and saving your drawings, so it's sort of like layers. If anybody has used Photoshop or any other graphics tool, the concepts of layers, they're non-destructive, and the combination creates the end result. And the important thing about it is that that SVG is on top of it, so you can draw to your cards, you can put icons in there, you can draw it, you can sign it. Then what it does is it stores that as SVG in the database, and whenever it needs to, it can merge that back and display it to you and handle it. So SVG is very critical because it unlocks our ability to use what's called the ink control. And for any external mobile inspection, this is going to be huge. And we have examples of it. It's actually in our inspection app where you can go out and you can say, take a picture on your phone of a situation, like for instance, where not a hydrant, but like a fire extinguisher is. And therefore you can sit there and literally take the picture, draw on it, sign it, and date it, etc. right there, store it all, and therefore when you send say it's a violation code to the customer, they don't just get some kind of nondescript, it's there, it's more natural. And therefore the human is interacting with it very naturally, but they're getting the power of having it on top of an image, and you don't have to describe it, you can actually take the picture and draw on it, which is very, very powerful. So SVG is a critical part of Alpha. It's there. We obviously, as we started, we now have a set of icons on here. Nice thing is these are all scalable, so you can say make them really big or small. You can use them on anywhere you want, on buttons and images and other pieces there. And we find that it's really fun. It opens up whole new to very colorful icons you can bring in your own, and underlying it is SVG, which you're going to learn more about, and we're going to be using more and more because the creativity it unlocks is enormous. So that's the first of the key 4.1 features. They were SVG icons. I keep talking about fonts. we'll go over, next week we're actually going to go over email, and then we're going to go over push notifications. So we'll go over those before. I didn't want to take up all today going over all the different capabilities there. But check it out. Take a little time. Again, this site is really powerful. Because they talk about, path things, stroking, text, how you do SVG text on there. And you notice that it has a lot of really capabilities, and notice this, like you can take text and have it at an angle, and all you're doing is doing a transform on your text saying, rotated this degree. So a little bit of his learning about how, the commands that are in there. It's a very HTML-like scenario. But once you get this down, you could literally create all this stuff, so you could have this being dynamically drawn on top of your user interface. So really fun stuff. Great trainings available out there, so feel free to go and explore on that. Next week we'll go over the Spark Post implementation, and that's what I have for today from a standpoint of a pre-made presentation. Dave, I'll hand it back to you.
That is great. Thank you very much, Dan. Let me see what I've got here for questions. We do have a bunch. One question is, someone said that they just loaded Alpha Anywhere version 4.1 this week, and for the SVG option, that they selected it, but there were no icons. Are icons
they didn't
included?
give this interface here. Let's see. Let me show it to you. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Should have seen that. So we can check on that. I haven't seen any other reports of that. So
can you demonstrate how to get to that in the software?
Well, I have actually, I showed it there, but it's actually a pre-release, and I've got some flaws in mine. So we'll check on that and get back to you. So email us to guides@alphasoftware.com, and I'll look into that. And anybody else, just email us, and we'll get back to you on that. But it's handled the same way you select Font Awesome and a material icon, same methodology there. Could have been just an install issue that occurred, but we'll double check on that.
Great. Another image question, and that has to do about storing images. So the question is, they're building a new application. They're using a SQL backend, and their question is, should they be storing the images in the database, or should they be just storing it on the file system or on the hard drive with pointers from the database to those images on the hard drive? What is your preference, and why?
Yeah, I mean, storing in the database is super, super simple. Basically it turns it in what's called base 64, which again looks like gobbledygook, but it's just a textual rendering of what the bitmap is in there, or the PNG or JPEG kind of scenario there. The downside is that over time, images are pretty hefty in size. You're going to have a lot of stuff in the database. The other is that the ability to move those around. So my preference is, if I'm doing something simple and I'm not going to have a ton of images, maybe one per record or something, then yeah, I'll just put it in the database because it's quick and simple. It's easy to set up, etc. But for larger implementations, I have found that actually storing the images outside of the database is probably the way to go for a couple reasons. One, it allows you now to store it not only on the Alpha app server, but using our built-in Amazon S3 storage and Azure storage, you can actually store this stuff up on a cloud environment, which does a couple things. One is enormous amount of space. At very, very inexpensive prices. It's very, very cheap, and it gets cheaper and cheaper all the time. Security and safety, because they're highly secure environments, and they're a situation also where they are redundant and they have a lot of servers, so you don't have to worry about losing a bunch of images, say if a database got corrupted. That does beget the question of security. If there are high security issues, then you may not want to be putting it on a cloud provider. You may want to be either putting it in the database and or on the file server itself in Alpha. But there is one other advantage of using, say, S3 or something, is that when you actually go to transfer the images up, you're not actually usually going through Alphas, that it will go directly to S3 and move the image from the local browser up to S3, so your performance will be greater. You'll put less demand on your Alpha server. So there's some performance increases also by using the external file concept. Personally, I lean towards external file just because not only are you able to use a lot of things like Amazon S3, etc., but the other benefit, which I really like, is that you can now manage those files externally from the database in the application. So you could be storing them in one location, and then you say, oh, you know what, I really want to store them in a different location, or I want to pull those into another app or something like that. The content's available on the file system, so it's very easy to access and go after. So I see most of them are tending towards using them outside the system, but if you have a fairly simple app where you're not going to have a ton of images, but you want to be able to take some snapshots, doing it in the database is very, very simple, and I usually start there just to get it going, and then I work towards a more broader file-based environment. Now, last thing I want to state on that, and I apologize if it's going long, the last thing I want to state on that is that if you're planning on doing offline disconnected, then you really want to look at external files, because the newer versions of Alpha allow you to basically select the images from, say, the phone, store that data in the database or in your list control that then gets synced, and the system will take care of moving those files up to the server for you. Therefore you can operate in a very nice disconnected mode, and then when you do sync, then it's just going to do a file transfer from the local device up to the server for you. So if you're looking at mobile disconnected, that's also really a very important kind of aspect. Although putting it in the database works fine, because when you have a list control, it's just going to take that base 64 data, put it into the JSON string that's managed on the local device, and then sync that JSON string, that base 64 JSON content back to the database and store it in the proper column within the database. And all of that works fine. You can pick and choose depending on your application. But those are kind of, I like to go over the kind of different scenarios that you may envision needing those capabilities.
Terrific. Next question is one that we got by email, and hopefully we have an answer for it. If not, we will get an answer very soon.
I know.
It has to do with having to do with exporting records. So let's say you've got a bunch of records on a screen, and you want to put a button on there and say export these records to Excel. Do you have to build a report with that export to Excel thing built into it, or can you export to Excel without building a report?
The answer is absolutely, you don't have to build a report. And in fact, the easiest way to do this is through a grid control, although a list does manage this also. Let me go ahead and grab this customer grid I already built and pull it up.
Great. And
show you just how easy this is. And it's really flexible too. There's a lot of control over what you can do, and I'll walk you through that. So I'm opening up a grid control that's connected into my database. And sorry, I've got a lot of stuff running on here, so it's taking a moment to come up. There we go. Okay, so in this case, I have the query for this grid. And that query, and I'll show you the queries so you got an idea of what they are. Come on. It's running a little slow today. I've been doing some other stuff. So. Come on, wake up. There we go. It's not an SVG, so it's a little slower than the other. Okay. So it's connected in the database, and then obviously through all the different aspects, you can pick a certain set of columns that are available in that. So in this case, I'm just pulling it directly from the table customers. But very important, especially for exports, sometimes you have like foreign key relationships. Sometimes you want to create a grid that's based on a view so that you have all the human readable versions. So like for instance, if you have company ID and company, which is a foreign key relationship to say a person, then in a view you can actually have that all done. Or you could obviously create it in our using a SQL select statement here. But I tend to like views. They're very handy there. So we have view fields here that are available. So if I just do a working, this one's not, you know what, if you don't mind, I'm going to take 1 second here just to make this a little bit more substantive. Okay. I'm going to create a new, I'm clicking new component. And it is a little sluggish, I apologize. Not normally this way. I just, I think I'd been doing a bunch of stuff, so got it confused. Okay, come on. So that's going. You know what? Bear with me, everybody. I'm just going to relaunch real quick. This is when I need the distracting music. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. So relaunch that. I think I just got too much going on.
You don't have the PRLCC process running in the background,
I'm not
do you?
sure. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a while. I'm up to a newer version. Have you noticed that's kind of gone away a little bit? But I get another one, which I think is I'm on a Mac, everybody, so I'm pretty sure that I did a recent install, and I think it's Dropbox is causing the system to go off and go up to like very high amount. So it's not on the parallel side; it's actually on the there, and then it goes away. Like notice it's like rocket fast now.
Yeah.
So like
Super.
the Mac was busy doing something that annoying. So okay. Thanks everybody for your patience. We'll go in here. We're going to go ahead and select the customers table. So we have that. We'll go to fields now. I'm going through this fairly quickly, but I'm going to take these fields here and I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. Okay, and we'll do a working preview. And you're going to see it's going to do is grab everybody in the customer table and show me them there. Okay, so we're there. So I'm going to go, we'll call this grid export underscore grid. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to have the ability to export this data to an Excel file or an ASCII file. Well, the nice thing about that is Alpha has built into it this capability. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my properties over here. This is the properties for my grid. And I'm going to scroll down here. And of course, if you want to, you can just click Search Properties and look for what are called action buttons. This is where you can add pre-made actions to your grid. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to Action Buttons, again, in the Properties section. I'm going to click on here. I'm going to add the action button. I'm going to call this Export. And I'm going to put a nice Export Records. I could display this as a button, a hyperlink, or an image. So I'll click OK. So this is what's going to show up as a button, but now I have to actually tell it when the person clicks on this button what to do. So now I'm going to go into JavaScript. And I'm going to add a new action. So I'm going to click here. I could type in JavaScript, but they already got everything built for me. So I'm going to get there. And I'm going to go ahead and start typing export in my filter list. And you'll notice in here we have export to Excel and advanced export using a report definition. Now I'm going to show you the first one, but the second one gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of layout. The first one's pretty much so you got the columns, you got some control, but if you'd like to export it and then use a report as sort of a formatting tool, you can do that. But the user's really looking forward to saying, listen, I want to do an export. I don't want to have to build a report to do that. So I'm going to click the first one here for export to Excel or ASCII or custom format. So now I get to decide what my export type is. I can use regular Excel, Excel, the newer version, comma delimited, tab delimited, or even my own custom. So you could do like pipe delimited or anything you want there. The source, you can select the source, and what we do is we select what the source is, and this is very important. You have options. So the first one is it's going to export all fields in the grid component, so all the ones that are displayed. The next one is called all fields in the grid query. So if I'm not showing certain fields on the user interface, but I'm still pulling that data back, I've kind of gotten hidden, I can export both that and that. And then the other is selected fields in the grid, and then a full custom capability. So you'll play with these, but this depends on essentially what you want their ability to export. So I'm just going to click all grids or all fields in the grid component for now. Now the client-side field name, it's going to automatically create that, but you do have control over setting up what the file name will be when it's stored on the local system. The other thing you can do, which is really nice for large data sets, is you can have the system automatically zip that file. So you can click zip file and it will do that. You can decide whether to export hidden fields or not. You can decide if you want to use the grid column headings, so whether you would want to see the column heads or not. Very important if you're importing into another system, you may want those headings so they can do the mapping. you also have record selection. You can say records in the current query, so if you've already put a search on it or a filter, you could do that. All records or just one record. So you get the ability to kind of control which of the records you have there. And then you can set a maximum number. If if you don't want them downloading 1,000,000 rows, you can just say I'll give them 10,000 or whatever. Now, very nicely, and I won't go into it now, is that you have these events. So after this, you can actually run an XBasic call to do some stuff. Maybe you want to note in a log file that someone has exported data from your system for audit purposes. The other is that on the client side, you can do some before and after export things. So there's a lot of hooks on that. And as usual, if I put here, I'm going to say after export for the name of the routine, I'm going to click Show Function Prototype, and let's say server side, and this gives me some sample code that shows me how I can interact and do that. So they give you that information there. But I'm going to keep it simple. I want it to be, let's go ahead and make it regular Excel. I'm going to do all fields in there, and I'm just going to leave it defaulted and the rest of the stuff defaulted. Click OK and save this. So now I've created a button called Export, which will perform that export. I'm going to click OK. But I'm not done yet. I need to actually display that button on the screen. And the way I do that is I scroll down a little bit farther, and we have what are called freeform edit regions. Above grid, below grid, left grid, so where they'll position themselves. So in here, I'm going to open that up. I can put any HTML I wanted in here, like for instance, export stuff, so this takes standard HTML, so that's nice. But you'll notice over here, we have a placeholder called Action Button Export. This is essentially pointing to what I just created. So if I just double click on that, I can put that in here, and when this grid runs, what it will do is it will render that button and the callback and everything I need to actually perform the action. So I click OK. Going to go ahead and save that. So steps were, step 1, create your action button, and add the action item to it. Second is I put it in there. I go in and do a working preview. You'll notice it's changed now, that everything looks the same, but now we have this nice export records button up here. So I'm going to click on that, and in a moment you're going to notice that it's doing its processing there. It's downloaded, and this would happen there. And here's my Excel sheet. Has all of my columns with the nice column header on it. Has all of my items that are in there. So pretty sharp. And you're able to create an Excel file in a very short, but this could be ASCII, could be your own pipe delimited, whatever you want. It's up to you in terms of how you want to do that. A lot of power you can do this, and again, there's an advanced version that if you wanted to kind of throw it through a report to kind of format it before it goes out, you could do that. But very simple. It takes only a few minutes to set up that Excel report, and it's all built in, I believe. And if I'm going to do this real quick, I want to just double check something here. Let me open up another demo, and let me go ahead and create a button here. I'm going to create another button. So this is a UX, and on that UX I have a list of customers. So before I was showing you a grid, but here I have a list of customers. What I can do now is I'm going to go ahead and just go here, and I'm going to go to my button. I'm going to add a button in here, and just to show you, and I believe it's in here, I can do list controls. So I go to list control actions, and let's say it's for, yep, right here. Okay, so let me walk you through that. I went kind of fast. I just want to make sure I was on track, but I have a list on my UX here, and I'm adding a button. It could be an image or whatever. It could be an SVG icon, which I highly recommend. But I'm going to go ahead and go to the click event. I'm going to add a new action to this button that when they click on it, it's going to trigger it. And in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to do if I go here, this is really handled around exporting, from a grid. So I'm going to go to my list control actions here. And when I open that up, it asks me, well, okay, which list? And I have a whole set, sort of a subset of commands that I can do, things like refreshing data, filtering lists, sorting lists, etc. But you'll notice down here there's a very powerful one called export list data to Excel and ASCII. So I click there. Now I can go in here, I can pick my format. You'll notice this is more limited. There's less control because it was just more of a nice to have. Definitely, if you want control, the grid is the way to go. The export at is you could download it or send it to an XBasic function, which is really cool because you can then put it into an email and email it to someone. Very cool kind of capability there. What are we going to export? The data in the list query or the data shown in the list? And then the maximum number, in this case, -1. So I can add this same capability to a UX control with a list. It is a little bit more limited than the grid one. The grid one's much more mature. But if you want a quick and dirty Excel export capability, it's pretty easy to add using the list control action called export list data. Our export list data to Excel and ASCII. So that covers both a easy, simple way in a grid, and also this handles if you're using a UX in terms of your capabilities there. And so I'll go ahead and won't save that. I've done that. So that should, I hope, give you enough to go out and be dangerous. And I'd like to thank you. It seemed like such a smooth demo because I was in position because this person was kind enough to send us an email with that question at guides@alphasoftware.com. That's guides@alphasoftware.com. And I highly encourage our loyal fans to send those in so we can be prepared and give you really good feedback and hopefully solve your problems as soon as possible.
Speaking of loyal fans, some of them have been asking, where do we get the recordings? And I always say videos.alphasoftware.com for the recordings of these sessions. Although that has changed a bit. That is where they should be, although it seems like they're going a little bit slow, so I need to check on that. It seems to be an issue. In the meantime, while I'm fixing that, there is another place to get the videos. I have.
Do you want to show your screen and maybe you just show them? Yeah.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that.
I'm visual.
Yeah. Okay. Show my screen. Great. So in the chat window, I have pasted this URL, videos.alphasoftware.com/VAM _video _grid.a5w. So you might want to just grab that out of the chat window, paste that into your own browser, and bookmark this. This is actually our sort of it is open to the public, but this is sort of our system of record, and videos get pulled out of here and they're put into the other videos.alphasoftware.com database, sort of the default one that you see. But if you've got this URL, you can go right here. Once you're
you'll notice that's an Alpha Anywhere application running on the web. That's a grid.
It is indeed.
Yeah, so we eat our own dog food.
We do at that. So here, if you do a search for Q&A, you will find a bunch of records, and you can sort them by date. Usually reverse chronological order usually makes the most sense. So we have these here. There is one for the 27th. I guess that hasn't gone up. I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah, I think we need to start posting this to IMDb.
I know, exactly.
Then we can have like who the guest star is and
but this is good. You could also, like I said, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like how it's Dave McCormick, not DM McCormick, on everything.
Isn't it great?
I'm going to have to talk to my lawyer about our contract with publishing rights.
Just tell him to change it to D McCormick, and then we won't have any fights.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody gets happy.
Yeah. And this is our regular video database. Like I said, this will be within a matter of a week or so, or two. Should have everything in it as well. But here's, like if you click on Q&A here, okay, I think it did its search.
I think, yeah, it grabbed a bunch of stuff in other ones. So.
It does, yeah, it's, okay, so that's what I'm saying. There are some oddities, but if you then pop into webinar video, and yeah, the order is all messed up.
We had 38 webinars, and I know those aren't online, but man.
I know it.
Hours and hours of video to put you to sleep.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's right. A whole work week now of just our videos. Anyway, that's where they're located. That's where you can find them for now. They're also up on YouTube as well. They get listed there too. So if you want to get them there, you can get them there. So that is it. Let me pop back over to some questions, and do keep the questions coming if you can. There's a couple good ones. Oh, ink control on a report. Is that even a possibility? Someone's asking if we can do that.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, an ink
Yeah,
control is an interactive control,
right.
so it's really meant to be it's really a mobile optimized form technology. So it's a type of editor, and we'll be talking more about that, but you're editing a certain type of content. And so I don't think that, you never know, but I don't think that's really feasible at this time, to
Can
use it
you
in that
imagine a
form.
scenario, though, in which it would be possible to present the reports on a page and maybe still have a signature capture control?
Yeah, I mean, you can use things like absolute layout and other techniques to represent a form, and then when you touch it, there's no reason why you couldn't then go to, like, have a JavaScript that took you to the editor that then presented that form in the background, and then you write stuff on top of it. But it's kind of, a report is sort of an output thing versus a input deal, really, and so I would really assess that you'd want to use it purely as an input tool. But remember, what you can do, which is very powerful, is you could put any kind of background. So you could literally put a form behind an ink control, and they could be writing on top of a form. It won't control where they can write, but it will allow them to write on top of a form. So you could essentially replicate forms, or you could take images and do that, or any number of different things. Like think of a doctor's chart. Where they have on the chart, they have an image of the body, and they say, point to where it hurts. They could literally have that, and then you could be drawing on there, like, okay, my shoulder or my elbow, and drawing around that piece, an area, and that would be a great use of an ink control, because it's a very natural. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to circle my left elbow and my right shoulder, and then I'm going to put like pain level 1 on one and pain level 6 on the other, or whatever. So it really has a huge amount of applicability in terms of what we call the clipboard economy. Anywhere you see people doing clipboard kind of work where they're marking up. A great example too is I rented a car this last weekend for a quick trip, and if you've rented a car, you walk out, they have a piece of paper on a clipboard, and they have a virtual diagram of the car, and you sit there and you go around the car and you mark where there's previous damage, etc., that you want to make sure you don't get dinged, no pun intended, when you get back. And so you think about it, you're doing that there. Who wouldn't, if it's obviously is overkill, but you could literally, have a picture of the vehicle itself and be circling that stuff so you have a pure record of it, which is more like automobile repair or inspection. But anywhere you see clipboards with visual representation and people writing on a visual representation, that's the ink control, and then you'll be able to create applications that replace that. And the real power of it is, since it's electronic, it's immediately recordable, it's immediately distributable, and since it's ink, it's very small in footprint, so therefore your database doesn't have to get massive in order to handle all this data. Very, very cool and very fun to play with. That's one of the key controls in the mobile optimized that are just a blast. You just unlock so many cool things you can do.
Cool. Here's a question. Someone is actually looking for answers about many-to-many tables and the junction tables and how they could be handled in Alpha. So they've looked through our message board and through documentation, but didn't actually find much. I don't know if you have experience working
I
with
have
many-to-many.
experience with that. Yeah, I call them link tables, but
Yeah.
there's many junction tables. There's standards pieces there. Whenever I build that, I usually do it within the database itself. Actually, if you don't mind putting.
Oh, I'll give you back control. Yep.
I'll grab that. Excellent. Okay, so I use something called Navicat for my items, but I've also used tools such as dbForge. And I like to do most of my database stuff here because these tools are extremely optimized for handling and managing databases. So when I'm working to create them, and I'll get, so I can go in here and I can go here and I can go and grab, let's say, my demonstration database. Where's my demonstration database? Okay. So I've got some tables in here. I can do, which is very powerful, is I can create a new diagram. And again, there's many tools like this, so I can drag these pieces out here. And so I see a visual representation, and then if I want to join one thing to another, I can actually go up here and say, okay, I'm joining this to this, and it would create it. It actually modifies the database. It's really, really powerful. I won't do that because I don't want to screw up my stuff, but you do there. So this is where you would create, for people who aren't familiar with it, the way that works is that if you have a mini-mini relationship with a junction table, you might have like, you know, oh, that's not good because I already got, but you would have a table that kind of relates the information in this table to here, because you could have many of these connected to the many of these. And so I do my design work and development in these kind of tools here. Now, once I'm in that, I also, by the way, when I'm in there, I also spend the time to create views against that data, so I can create a view based on this. So it takes care of the complexity, so all I'm dealing with are the views. And then when I go into Alpha, when I'm designing this and I go to the query, I can select in that query, I can select not only tables but also views in my database that are already preset. So it makes life a lot easier. Now, the reality is you could click SQL select statement here and edit this, and this is powerful enough to create those, but I find the other's more intuitive. You're dragging and dropping in other pieces there. It's much more simple, and it's kind of built in, and I save those relationships and views. But Alpha has the ability to handle that kind of scenario. You just have to spend a little time thinking through. And the two areas are, first, you got to kind of grade the relationships, you know, like how are these tables linked and what are the data that's associated with it. The next step, which is really the more important part, is that the strategy of how you're going to edit that data in there. So, and it becomes very simple, is that basically that table in the center, which is called the link table, is basically linking a record from here with a record from here. So if you think about it, well, geez, this is just a data editor, so I'm going to put in a data table here and set up an editor. Let's see if I can kind of demo this really quickly. So I would create a new component, let's say a UX here, okay? And now what I would do is in the data binding, when I bind the data, I'm going to specify the table. I'm going to specify this center table here because I'm really editing that table. I'm inserting records, I'm deleting records, etc. from that table. And that record is basically a relationship between a category and a product. So categories could have, you know, I don't have great examples, but actually the one I like here, let me go ahead and restart this and put something that's a little bit here. Let me go File, New, Database Diagram. So I have, let's go ahead and not go into Views, but let's say go here. So let's say you have customers and orders. So you have that. Now I have a direct linkage here, but there may be situations where multiple customers may need to be able to see the same order. Kind of strange, but it could be in this table I have both distributors and end customers, and they both have to be able to see that. So I'll create some interim middle table that will track the relationship of one of these customers connected to one of these orders, and therefore I can manage it in that information. Now when you build your UX, when you bind your UX, you're binding it to the center control here. That's what you're managing. You're editing those relationships in this table. Then to actually create the user interface, you can do something as simple as put in two drop-down box, so customers, orders. And so then I would go into the first customers right here, go to my choices. I'm going through this quick because we only have a few minutes left, but you can, so I'm going to go here, I'm going to select connection. I'm going to then select, in this case, customers, and I want to show the company name and store their ID, because that's what I'm going to store in that interim table. I'm going to do the same thing with orders. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to dynamic. I'm going to select a alpha DAO. I'm going to use my same connection string. And then I'm going to then select my orders table. And I'm going to select order ID. And I'm just going to store also order ID, you know, for now. Okay. So now, then I would put in, now again, I would have linked this to that middle one, and these would be related, these two fields would be related to fields here. So I would bind in here, you would say customer ID, order ID. So you'd have like an ID for this record, and then an ID for the customer you're connecting to the order you're connecting, and that's all you're managing in this table. Then when this runs, they select a customer, and they select a order ID, they hit enter, it's going to insert in this table that relationship between these two. And conversely, I could create a grid that would show those relationships and be able to delete that record or update it or modify it. So that's the way I approach these link tables, is that I first kind of get everything structured in the database, the relationships between these pieces here, and put that together in my database. Then in here I create a UX, could be a grid too, it doesn't have to be a UX, that basically edits this table right here. And in there, I reference in one drop-down box this, the other in orders. When I select a customer or an order and insert it in here, it basically puts that relationship in this table. Now it's viewable, it's editable, it's whatever you happen to do. So that's kind of a quick and dirty, and I apologize I don't have a better example to show you the exact mechanisms there. But that's the strategy, is first kind of understand the relationships, get them laid out in the database, and then after you've done that, so over here, you can start creating your UXs or grids that present the data from the different tables, and then the UX or grid is responsible for inserting, editing, deleting the record in that join table or link table or junction table, whatever you want to choose it. So I hope that gives you enough pointers. Got it done under the gun, and I hope that's sufficient for you to be able to attack that problem.
Excellent. There were a couple questions we couldn't get to, but we'll try to get to next week. But thank you very much for everyone who asked questions and attended. Thank you, Dan, for presenting.
My pleasure.
Hope to see you in a future webinar. Take care and goodbye.